Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. To start off this video, we've got a story about a manager who thought she could outsmart decades of IT workflow logic with one single rule. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. The manager who tried to ban multitasking and got fired. Working in IT, my friend and I had what I'd call a solid, comfortable gig. Nothing glamorous, nothing soul-crushing, just coding, fixing bugs, pushing updates, and answering the occasional, "Why does it do that?" from someone who definitely broke it themselves. Predictable chaos. We liked it. Our manager, though, let's call her Karen. Not the screaming hair flip stereotype, more the passive-aggressive, I read one productivity article and now I'm an expert type. She loved rules, especially ones she invented herself. One morning she calls a meeting. Nothing unusual. We assume it's the standard "don't forget to log your hours" nonsense. Nope, she walks in with the energy of someone about to change the world through sheer managerial willpower. Starting today, she announces, no more working on multiple tasks at once. One task at a time. Finish it completely before touching anything else. My friend and I look at each other like, did she really just ban multitasking in IT? On paper, sure, sounds efficient. Fewer context switches, more focused work. In reality, IT doesn't work like that. A ton of tasks hit natural pauses, waiting for testing, approvals, deployment windows, stakeholder replies, or someone from QA to stop eating lunch long enough to check your ticket. Multitasking isn't a choice, it's survival. We tried to explain all of that, tried to be calm, logical, reasonable. Karen, sometimes we literally cannot continue a task until someone else responds. If we can't pick up side work while waiting, we'll be stuck doing nothing. She gave us a smile that almost hurt to look at. No exceptions. Your professionals, adapt. All right then. So we did exactly what she demanded. First day wasn't too bad. Second day, delays started stacking up. By the end of the week, chaos. We'd submit something for review, and instead of picking up another ticket, we'd literally just sit there waiting. Not pretending, actually waiting, sometimes for hours. Our ticket board started to look like a graveyard. Customers were complaining that nothing was getting fixed. Deadlines evaporated. Upper management started emailing Karen asking what was going on. Her response? "My team's struggling to follow new procedures." No, Karen, your procedure is broken. But sure, blame us. Week 2, things escalated. We had blocks in almost every task. Approvals that usually came in 30 minutes suddenly took half a day because everyone else was overloaded too. Instead of bouncing between tasks and keeping things flowing, we sat there doing absolutely nothing. And we made sure not to hide it. If Karen walked by, we'd smile and say, "Still waiting for approval, can't start anything else." She hated that smile. Then came the tipping point. A major client escalated because a simple fix had taken 5 days. Upper management scheduled a discussion with Karen. She left the room looking like she'd aged 10 years in 45 minutes. Next morning, email from HR. Effective immediately, Karen is no longer with the company. No explanation, just gone. Everyone in our department read that email, then looked at each other like, well, that was fast. Our new manager started a few days later. Show guy, real industry background, actually understood how workflows function. First meeting, he looks at the team and says, "So I heard that there were some new policies before I got here." "Yeah, forget all that. Work how you need to work. Just keep communications clear." We practically cried. Productivity bounced back within a week. Clients were happy again. The ticket board was no longer a disaster zone. Me and my friend, we still joke about it sometimes. If one of us gets blocked waiting on someone else, we'll lean back and say, "Well, I guess Karen wouldn't let us start anything else." And then we laugh and multitask anyway. Turns out the team wasn't the problem, the manager was. And once she was gone, everything worked exactly the way it always had. The contrast between Karen and the new manager says it all. One imposed a rigid method based on theory and ego. The other recognized that IT teams function best with flexibility and communication. You gave her exactly what she asked for, and the resulting disaster highlighted how disconnected she was from the reality of the job. And our second story. An entitled customer harassed my fiancé for not helping her find tablets while his arm was around me and our cart was full of baby stuff. So my fiance, I'll call him Andy for the sake of this post, works at Walmart 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Recently, I've been meeting him there after work to do late night shopping because that's when no customers are in the store, if not very few. So this night we were shopping for baby stuff, seeing as we're having a baby in less than a month. Our cart is full of baby stuff, and he's holding me, being loving and whatnot. Now, usually on his breaks, lunches, and after clocking out, he'll roll up his Walmart vest and put it around his neck like an athlete would a sweat towel or something. Keep in mind, it doesn't look like his vest whatsoever. However, we're browsing the TVs, talking about which we'd like to downsize to, and he mentions how the store will be getting new TVs, so all the current TVs will be going on sale soon. I guess this is what gave this random lady the idea that he was working or on the clock. So as Andy has his arm around my waistline and we're observing a TV, this lady, Karen for the sake of it, comes up to us and asked him, "Are these all the tablets you guys have?" Andy looks at her. "I'm not working right now, but yes, everything you see here is what's available." Now, in my mind, I know he doesn't even have to acknowledge her, and he was courteous enough to answer the question. He could have just said a simple, "I don't work here," because technically he's a customer at that point. But Karen, of course, disagrees with this logic and gets upset. "Well, I didn't ask that. I asked for help. Can you go get someone who works here?" Visibly, I can see Andy's expression completely shift from his kind customer service face to his "I don't give a F" face, and usually what comes after is not good. Andy repeats, "I'm not working right now. I'm shopping with my girl. I can't help you. I'm sorry." And we kind of start walking away. Karen obviously doesn't like this response and replies, "So you can't just go get someone?" Luckily, as she's demanding Andy, again a customer himself at this point, to get someone, a manager comes up and addresses the lady. I wish I could say that was the end of the back and forth, but Karen kept saying how rude Andy was being and how she didn't like his attitude, which of course provoked Andy to rebuttal by saying he's not working and he's shopping. The manager then tells Karen something along the lines of, "He doesn't work here, he's a customer just like you." Apparently, if you work at Walmart or give any indication that you work at Walmart, customers will demand that you help them even if you aren't on the clock. Now, for some of you who may not know, Walmart has a strict policy of working off the clock. Even Andy answering her initial question about the tablets could get him in trouble, but he did because he wanted to be decent. Another entitled customer. SMH. And our next story. A grumpy neighbor declared war. I got home the other day to a warning from my local police department for having high grass. It stated that I must cut the grass within 5 days or potentially face a fine. The grass they're referring to is my 2 3x15 pollinator patches that I intentionally let grow and I clearly maintain well within my property lines. Some backstory. My neighbor, let's call him Jerk, is one of those grumpy old men that's obsessed with his lawn. I'm talking mows it in the winter, mows it twice a week in the summer. It's the man's entire personality. I've lived across the street from him for years. Every year he makes crappy comments, and he's even taken it upon himself to mow my grass for me if I go longer than a week. So Jerk filed a complaint with the police department. I know this because I called the ordinance enforcement officer in charge to ask about a way to appeal this, and when I told him about the grass in question, he told me not to worry about it. He admitted my neighbor files a complaint every month about it. He's coming out next week to take photos and see the property for himself, but I'm not too worried about it. He seemed just as annoyed as I did. Well, last night I did something I'm very proud of. It consisted of concentrated weed killer, a long-range water gun, and a moving vehicle. Best of luck to you and your lawn, Jerk. Update. Sadly, the code enforcement officer has ruled in his favor. I had to remove my pollinator patches, but was given alternatives to bring them back and remain compliant with local codes. But this is far from over. The Great War continues. I've discarded approximately 42 grass nukes into his lawn via the ice cube and chuck it, dog toy thrower method. My campaign's been quite successful. I can see roughly a dozen dead spots, approximately the size of a softball/soccer ball from my house. But I've been launching cubes out of sight, so I'm sure there's more. I noticed him spraying something to stain the dead spots this morning. It looks like green paint. My girlfriend noticed him spreading something else over the spots last week, but oddly enough, it didn't work. I can't imagine why. We've also made a few bouillon cubes that I intentionally throw closer to the house. I've noticed more stray cats in his yard since Operation Stank Jerk began. We're continuing to drop cubes into the war zone every other night. I won't provide pictures for obvious reasons. I don't know if I can trust all of you. I wish you could have written jerk in the grass with the weed killer, but that would require you to stop and risk discovery. Or use the hot water and lots of salt in a backpack spray. In a few minutes, you can turn a good bit of lawn into a wasteland where nothing will grow. And our last story. He insisted the land was his because he mowed it. The HOA, the city, and the county tax assessor had a different opinion. When my parents bought their house in Overland Park, Kansas last year, they expected the usual headaches that come with moving, not a full-blown border dispute with an entitled neighbor. They closed just after Christmas, and right now my mother is the only one living there because she's working abroad while my sister finishes her senior year back home. My father, meanwhile, spends every weekend making a brutal 6 to 8 hour round trip to help take care of projects for her. He's prickly, blunt, and not one for diplomacy, but he gets things done. One of the first major projects was repairing the electric fence so the dogs could safely stay in the yard once everyone moved in. To do that, the HOA required a professional survey and a detailed plan. Straightforward enough. At least it should have been. The trouble started the moment the surveyor stepped into the very back corner of the yard with his equipment. My parents' rear neighbor came marching out of his house like someone had set off a car alarm in his living room. He began yelling at the surveyor to get off his property immediately and demanded to know what they were building back there. The surveyor, confused, tried explaining that he was only marking boundaries. That explanation didn't help. The neighbor insisted that the section being surveyed was his land because he had planted several trees there 20 years ago and had been taking care of it ever since. It didn't matter that he never bought the land. It didn't matter that all legal records showed the property belonged entirely to my parents. It didn't even matter that the previous owners never gave him permission. According to him, 20 years of occasionally trimming trees had magically rewritten the county records. When my father heard about this, he called the neighbor the next morning. And again, diplomacy is not my father's strong suit. He went straight for facts. My father pointed out that no document, no deed, no HOA covenant, no contract of any kind ever granted this man ownership. If he wanted that portion of land, he could make an offer like a normal human being. The neighbor didn't like that suggestion at all. He wanted the land for free because he had taken care of it. My father, not missing a beat, asked him why he expected payment for trees he planted illegally on someone else's property. That ended the call swiftly. But the rear neighbor wasn't the only problem. The left side neighbor also violated HOA guidelines years ago by building a pocket fence 5 feet inside his own property instead of on the boundary. Now the HOA was telling both parties they had to meet fence to fence directly on the property line. The left neighbor demanded my parents leave a 5-foot alleyway between the two fences, even though the HOA explicitly forbade it. Within a week of moving in, my parents had stepped into an HOA rule maze, a boundary issue, and a self-declared land claimant who believed that mowing a strip of grass turned him into a land baron. It didn't take long before the HOA, the city survey office, and even the county assessor became aware of the neighbor's claim. Paperwork was pulled, maps were examined, records were verified, and the neighbor lost completely. First, the HOA formally informed him that all landscaping, including the trees he planted, was located on my parents' property and that he had no right to modify, maintain, or use the land without written permission, which he's never had. Second, the city notified him that since the trees were illegally planted, they could either be removed or considered encroaching structures, meaning he was financially liable for any damage they caused or maintenance required. Suddenly, his 20-year investment became a 20-year unpaid bill. Third, when he continued to argue, he unintentionally triggered a reassessment request for his property, believing it would help his case. Instead, the reassessment confirmed the boundaries and increased his property taxes due to improvements he'd made elsewhere on his lot. Finally, the HOA board voted to issue him a formal violation notice for harassment of a contracted worker, the surveyor, and interference with authorized property improvements. He was fined repeatedly. Within 6 months, according to neighborhood gossip, the man quietly listed his house for sale. He moved out before the following spring, still angry, still convinced the universe wronged him, but no longer anyone we had to deal with. My parents kept their land, the fence project was approved and completed, and the new rear neighbor introduced herself with cookies, thanked my parents for clearing up old disputes, and said she prefers living next to people who actually follow the rules. A peaceful ending finally earned. There's something incredibly predictable about people who treat unchallenged behavior as entitlement. The neighbor assumed that because he'd gotten away with using someone else's land for decades, it had somehow become his by default. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.